What if everything you've been told about goodness is a lie? We grow up believing that kindness wins, honesty prevails, and virtue is rewarded. But look around, who actually holds the most power? Is it the kind-hearted? Or the ones who understand when to be ruthless? History is filled with leaders, warriors, and rulers who tried to be purely good, and they were swallowed by the very system they tried to fix. Meanwhile, those who played the game with strategy, even deception, became legends. Niccolo Machiavelli saw this centuries ago. His words still shake the foundations of power today. He didn't say, "Be evil." He said, "Be wise." He revealed a truth most people are afraid to accept: goodness alone is not enough. So, if being good doesn't guarantee success, what does? If kindness can be a weakness, how do you turn it into a weapon? And most importantly, are you making the same mistakes that doomed history's greatest failures? This is not just about philosophy. It's about survival. By the end of this video, you'll see why being only good might be the most dangerous decision of your life. But don't worry, you'll also learn how to wield goodness with power, without being consumed by it. Let's begin. Not all thinkers write to inspire. Some write to warn. Niccolo Machiavelli wasn't a philosopher locked away in a library, theorizing about human nature. He was in the trenches of power, watching rulers rise and fall like waves crashing against the shore. He didn't dream of a perfect world, he studied the brutal one that actually exists. Born in 1469 in Florence, a city drenched in politics, betrayal, and war, Machiavelli wasn't a king, a warrior, or a nobleman. He was something more dangerous, a strategist. For years, he served as a diplomat, walking the fine line between rival powers, witnessing firsthand how the real world worked. He saw men who were good and weak. He saw men who were ruthless and victorious. And then, everything changed. Accused of conspiracy, he was tortured, exiled, and stripped of power. But instead of seeking revenge with a sword, he did something far more dangerous. He wrote a book. A book so powerful that rulers read it in secret. So controversial that its name became synonymous with cunning. The Prince. Not a guide for tyrants, not a manifesto of evil, but a mirror reflecting the harsh truth of power. What made this book so dangerous? Machiavelli dared to say what no one else would: if you want to survive in a world full of wolves, you can't live like a sheep. But what exactly did he reveal? And why do his lessons still shake the foundations of leadership, politics, and even your daily life today? Let's break it down. What would you choose, being loved or being feared? Most people instinctively say, loved. It feels right. It sounds noble. But history disagrees. Machiavelli asked a brutal question: what happens to leaders who rely only on goodness? The answer is simple: they get replaced. Or worse, erased. It's not that kindness is useless. It's that kindness without power is meaningless. Take a moment to think about this. If you were running a kingdom, a company, or even just trying to navigate life, would you rather have people admire you, or obey you? Would you rather be known as nice, or as someone who gets things done? Machiavelli wasn't interested in feel-good illusions. He studied the world as it was, not as people wished it to be. He realized that morality and power are not enemies, but tools. The real question is, who's holding them? Goodness alone can be a trap. Morality can make you predictable, and predictability makes you easy to control. But power bends reality. Yet, there's a balance. Be too cruel, and you'll create enemies who will never forget. Be too kind, and you'll invite wolves into your home. So, if being too good is dangerous, and being too ruthless creates enemies, what's the answer? Machiavelli had one. And it's not what you think. Let's go deeper. Good people believe the world rewards kindness. But history tells a different story. Machiavelli saw leaders who clung to their virtues, convinced that honesty, generosity, and fairness would keep them safe. They didn't realize their goodness wasn't a shield, it was a target. The world doesn't punish evil. It punishes weakness. Look at Florence, the city Machiavelli called home. It was ruled by the Medici family, until they were overthrown. Why? Because their kindness made them blind to the dangers around them. They assumed their generosity would earn loyalty. Instead, it invited betrayal. And they weren't alone. Julius Caesar, stabbed by his closest allies. Tsar Nicholas II? Too gentle to crush a revolution, executed. Countless kings, leaders, and even everyday people have learned this the hard way. But this isn't just about history. Look around. At work, the employee who never speaks up gets overlooked. In relationships, the one who gives too much is taken for granted. In business, the company that trusts too easily is the first to fall. The lesson? Being good is fine, until it makes you powerless. So, if absolute goodness is a weakness, what's the alternative? Machiavelli had an answer: cunning, strength, strategy. The next lesson is crucial. Because if you don't want to be a victim, you need to understand the power of deception. Let's talk about it. Strength alone doesn't make a ruler, neither does kindness. Machiavelli understood something most people miss. To survive, you must be both a lion and a fox. A lion commands respect, instills fear, and crushes opposition. But a lion alone is predictable, and predictability is dangerous. A fox, on the other hand, is clever. It senses traps before stepping into them. It knows when to retreat, when to strike, and when to play the fool. This is why Machiavelli said, "A prince must imitate both the fox and the lion, for the lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves." Think about that for a moment. If you only rely on brute strength, someone smarter will outmaneuver you. If you only rely on intelligence, someone stronger will crush you. But combine both, you become untouchable. History is filled with those who mastered this balance. Julius Caesar, a brilliant general and a master manipulator. Napoleon, fear on the battlefield, but also a political mastermind. Steve Jobs, ruthless in business, yet charismatic enough to inspire loyalty. The pattern is clear: those who survive don't just fight harder, they fight smarter. But how do you apply this? How do you use strength and cunning in your own life without losing your morality? That's where things get interesting. Because the next lesson is all about perception. And trust me, what people think about you is far more powerful than who you actually are. Let's break it down. What's more important, who you are, or who people think you are? Machiavelli had a clear answer: perception is power. He wrote, "It is not necessary to have all the virtues, but it is necessary to appear to have them." In other words, you don't have to be good, you just have to look good. And before you reject this idea, think about the world we live in. A politician shakes hands, kisses babies, and preaches honesty. Behind closed doors, corruption, deals, and power moves. A company claims to care about ethics and the environment. Behind the scenes, profits at any cost. A leader appears kind, wise, and just, but the moment their power is threatened, they strike without hesitation. It's a harsh truth, but a useful one. People don't follow reality, they follow perception. And here's the twist: even in everyday life, this rule applies. The confident person, even if unsure, is seen as a leader. The generous friend, even if calculated, is loved. The ruthless businessman, if charming enough, is admired. Machiavelli wasn't telling people to be fake, he was telling them to be smart. Why? Because the world judges by what it sees, not what is true. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Once people believe you are good, powerful, or righteous, they will defend you, even when the truth says otherwise. So, what's the lesson? Never just rely on your true self. Craft your image. Control your reputation. Shape what people see. But be careful, illusions are powerful, but they can also collapse. Which leads us to the next Machiavellian truth: when does goodness turn into a trap? Let's talk about it. Goodness is a virtue until it turns you into a victim. Machiavelli warned about a dangerous illusion: the belief that if you are good, people will treat you the same way. But the world doesn't work like that. In reality, people respect strength, not kindness. They admire virtue but follow power. Look at history. The leaders who refused to play dirty, who held on to their moral purity at all costs, where are they now? Forgotten. Overthrown. Replaced by those willing to do what was necessary. Even in everyday life, the pattern repeats. The kind boss who avoids conflict, employees walk all over him. The honest businessman who never bends the rules, crushed by ruthless competitors. The person who gives too much in relationships, ends up drained, unappreciated. It's not that being good is bad. It's that being good without strategy is dangerous. Machiavelli didn't say, "Don't be good." He said, "Don't let goodness make you weak." So how do you escape the trap? How do you be good without being naive? The answer lies in balance. The greatest rulers, the most successful people, they knew when to be kind, and when to be ruthless. They understood that mercy without power is surrender. And that brings us to one of Machiavelli's most brutal truths: it is better to be feared than loved. But why? And how can you use that knowledge without becoming a tyrant? Let's dive into it. Would you rather be loved or feared? Most people say loved. It sounds noble, but Machiavelli had a different answer, one that has shaped history's greatest leaders. It is much safer to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. Why? Because love is fickle. Fear is dependable. People love you as long as it benefits them. But fear? Fear keeps them loyal, even when love fades. Think about it. A leader who is only loved, the moment crisis hits, their followers scatter. A boss who is only kind, employees take advantage. Deadlines are ignored. A person who always seeks approval, they get walked over, forgotten. But let's be clear, Machiavelli wasn't saying be a monster. He wasn't saying cruelty is the answer. He was saying control is. Love alone doesn't guarantee loyalty. But respect, strength, and a little bit of fear? That keeps people in line. And history proves it. Julius Caesar was loved, but that love didn't stop Brutus from stabbing him. Napoleon was feared, and his armies followed him to the ends of the earth. Steve Jobs was known for being ruthless, but he built an empire that still dominates today. Now, ask yourself, in your own life, in your career, in your relationships, are you relying on love to keep people loyal? Or are you commanding respect? Because love is earned, but fear ensures survival. And that leads us to a deeper question. If power is about control, then how far should you go? Where do you draw the line between manipulation and leadership? Machiavelli had an answer. And it's one most people aren't ready to hear. Let's explore it. Most people believe they control their own choices. But do they? Machiavelli understood something most people refuse to admit. People are easy to manipulate. Not because they're weak, but because they crave security, admiration, and purpose. And those who understand this, those who know how to influence perception, hold the real power. Look at history. The most powerful figures weren't always the strongest. They weren't always the richest. They were the ones who controlled the minds of others. Julius Caesar turned his enemies into allies, until they feared him too much. Hitler didn't take power by force. He took it by persuasion. Modern politicians win elections not by honesty, but by selling dreams people want to believe. And it's not just in politics. A CEO convinces the world their product is revolutionary, even when it's not. An influencer builds a brand around authenticity, but behind the scenes, it's all staged. A person in a relationship plays the role of the perfect partner until they get what they want. The truth? People believe what they want to believe. And that's why the greatest manipulators don't force people. They guide them. Machiavelli didn't say manipulation is evil. He said it's necessary, because if you don't shape the world around you, someone else will. So the question is, are you being the player, or the piece? But be careful, powerful illusions can shatter. And if people realize they've been manipulated, they will turn on you. Which leads us to Machiavelli's next crucial lesson: when to be merciful, and when to be ruthless. Let's break it down. Mercy is powerful, but only when used wisely. Machiavelli didn't say goodness was useless, he said it had to be calculated. Blind kindness is a weakness. Strategic kindness? That's a weapon. Look at history's greatest rulers. The ones who lasted didn't rule with cruelty alone. They knew when to be generous, when to forgive, and when to appear merciful. But there's a catch. Mercy should never be given out of fear. It should never be given to those who can still hurt you. It should only be given when it reinforces your power, not weakens it. Think about it. Julius Caesar forgave his enemies. They killed him. Abraham Lincoln united a broken nation with mercy. He also died for it. Modern CEOs give out bonuses to keep employees loyal, but not because they're kind. Because it's good business. So when should you show kindness? When it benefits you. Machiavelli's rule was simple: if mercy strengthens your position, use it. If it weakens you, don't. This isn't about cruelty. It's about control. If you give too much, people take advantage. If you never give, they rebel. The balance is everything. The greatest leaders, the most powerful people, they knew how to make people feel valued, even when they were pulling the strings. So ask yourself, are you being kind because it's right? Or because it's effective? But here's where it gets dangerous. What happens when kindness no longer works? That's when you need something far more powerful. Let's talk about the cost of ignoring Machiavelli's advice. History doesn't remember the kindest. It remembers the ones who survived. Machiavelli didn't write The Prince as a fantasy. He wrote it as a warning to those who believe that virtue alone will protect them. Because time and time again, the world has proven otherwise. The cost of ignoring his lessons? Defeat, betrayal, oblivion. Look at those who refused to play the game. Julius Caesar trusted too much. His closest allies turned on him. Tsar Nicholas II refused to be ruthless. His own people executed him. Leaders, CEOs, and kings throughout history who believed their goodness would be enough, until they were replaced. But this isn't just about history. Every day, people who refuse to embrace strategy, who refuse to understand power dynamics, who believe that the world will reward their kindness, those people are left behind. The worker who never asks for a raise because they trust their boss will notice their hard work. The friend who gives endlessly, expecting loyalty in return, only to be abandoned. The business owner who refuses to adapt, believing that integrity alone will keep them afloat. Machiavelli wasn't telling you to be evil. He was telling you to be aware. Because in the real world, people don't lose because they're bad. They lose because they're unprepared. But here's the good news. You don't have to make the same mistake. The greatest leaders, the most powerful people, they all knew one thing. Morality and power don't have to be enemies. They just have to be controlled. And that brings us to one of the most debated questions of all time. Can morality and power coexist? Or is one always sacrificed for the other? Let's find out. Is it possible to be both good and powerful? Or does power always corrupt? Machiavelli believed that morality and power weren't opposites, they were tools. The real question wasn't can you be good and powerful, but do you know when to be good and when to be powerful? Think about the leaders who changed history. Nelson Mandela, a symbol of peace, yet he understood the necessity of control. Theodore Roosevelt, a charismatic leader, but also a strategist who knew when to be ruthless. Modern entrepreneurs and CEOs, they brand themselves as visionaries and philanthropists, but behind the scenes, they make the hard, cold decisions that keep them on top. They didn't abandon morality. They used it. Here's what Machiavelli would say. Be moral when it strengthens you. Be ruthless when it's necessary. Never let your morality become a weapon that others use against you. And here's the part most people miss. True power isn't in choosing one over the other. It's in mastering both. If you're only good, you'll be exploited. If you're only ruthless, you'll be hated. But if you control both, you become unstoppable. The key is knowing when to show kindness, and when to show strength. So, how do you apply this in real life? How do you balance morality and power without losing yourself? That's exactly what we'll cover next. Because the most important lesson isn't just understanding Machiavelli, it's learning how to use his wisdom in your own life. Let's break it down. Power isn't reserved for kings, CEOs, or politicians. It exists everywhere, in boardrooms, relationships, friendships, and even social media. The question isn't, does Machiavelli's advice apply to me? The real question is, am I already being outplayed by someone who understands it better? So how do you apply these lessons in your own life? Let's break it down. Don't be blindly good, be strategically good. Being good should be a choice, not a default. Help others, but never at your own expense. Give, but only to those who will value it. Ask yourself, are you kind because you want to be or because you're afraid of saying no? Understand the power of perception. People believe what they see. If you want respect, act with confidence, strength, and decisiveness, even if you're unsure inside. Would you rather be underestimated or seen as a force to be reckoned with? Know when to be ruthless. Not every battle is worth fighting. But when you must fight, win. When someone disrespects you, don't ignore it. When someone tries to manipulate you, don't let it slide. Are you standing up for yourself? Or are you waiting for the world to treat you fairly? Build loyalty, not just friendships. People follow those they respect, not those who seek approval. If you want true influence, be someone people admire, not just someone they like. Do people listen to you because they respect you, or because they feel sorry for you? Control the game, or be controlled by it. Power isn't about domination, it's about understanding the game and refusing to be a pawn. Every interaction, every decision, every relationship has power dynamics. Are you making moves, or are you waiting for someone else to decide your fate? The biggest mistake people make is thinking Machiavelli's advice is only for rulers. It's not. It's for anyone who wants to stop being controlled and start taking control. But there's one last lesson, one that ties everything together. The final, most important question: once you have power, how do you keep it? And here's where the real game of power begins. Let's finish this. Power isn't just about gaining control, it's about keeping it. And that's where most people fail. History is filled with leaders, rulers, and powerful figures who reached the top only to lose everything. Not because they weren't strong, but because they became blind to the very strategies that got them there. Machiavelli's final lesson is this: power is never permanent. You must always defend it. So ask yourself, if you gain respect, will you continue to earn it? If you build influence, will you protect it? If you rise to the top, will you be smart enough to see who's waiting to take your place? Because power isn't something you win once, it's a game that never stops. But here's the good news. Now, you see the game for what it is. You understand the balance between morality and strategy, between kindness and strength, between control and illusion. The world doesn't reward those who simply hope for the best. It rewards those who understand how it works and use it to their advantage. So, the final question is yours to answer. Will you be the ruler of your own fate? Or will you be ruled by those who understand what you refuse to see? Let's discuss in the comments. What's your biggest takeaway from Machiavelli's lessons? Do you agree, or do you think power and goodness can truly coexist? The choice is yours.